Hello everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
One innocent question. Have you ever wondered if a child can notice a broken marriage long before the parents do? That question stayed in my heart long after one quiet evening changed everything in my life. Before we begin, I want you to listen carefully because this is not only a story for learning English. It is also a story about love, family, second chances, and one little boy whose simple words saved our home. If you have ever felt lonely inside your own house, if you have ever worked so hard that you forgot how to smile at the people you love, or if you simply want to improve your English through a slow and meaningful story, then I hope you'll stay with me until the very end. Sometimes the biggest life lessons don't come from experts. Sometimes they come from a child who doesn't even realize he is changing the world around him. My name is Daniel, and I live with my wife and our young son in a quiet neighborhood in the United States. From the outside, our life looked almost perfect. We owned a comfortable home with a small backyard where our son loved chasing butterflies every spring. We had 2 reliable cars parked in the driveway. Every weekend, neighbors smiled and waved as they walked their dogs along our tree-lined street. Our social media photos showed birthday parties, family vacations, Christmas decorations, and happy smiles. If someone had asked whether we were a happy family, I probably would have answered yes, without thinking twice. But photographs never tell the entire story. Pictures capture smiles. They cannot capture silence. That silence had slowly become a permanent guest inside our home. It didn't arrive overnight. It entered quietly, almost politely, hiding behind busy work schedules, school activities, grocery shopping, bills, and endless responsibilities. At first, my wife and I simply talked a little less because we were tired. Then we stopped eating dinner together every evening because my meetings always seemed to run late. Eventually, even when we sat in the same living room, we were living in completely different worlds. I answered emails on my laptop. She scrolled through her phone. The television filled the room with noise while real conversations quietly disappeared. Relationship researchers often explain that emotional distance rarely begins with dramatic arguments. More often, it begins with small moments of disconnection repeated over hundreds of ordinary days. Looking back now, I understand exactly what they meant. We weren't fighting. We weren't yelling. We had simply stopped truly seeing each other. The strange part was that neither of us noticed how serious the situation had become. Human beings are remarkably good at adapting to unhealthy routines. Psychologists call this normalization. When something happens gradually, the brain starts believing it's normal. I believed it was normal to leave home before sunrise. I believed it was normal to answer work emails during dinner. I believed it was normal to say, maybe later, every time my son wanted to play. Later became my favorite word. Unfortunately, children measure time differently than adults. To a child, later sometimes feels like forever. One rainy Tuesday evening, I came home later than usual after another long day at the office. The streets were shining beneath the streetlights, and water slowly rolled down the windshield as I parked in the driveway. Inside the house, everything was unusually quiet. My wife was cleaning the kitchen without saying much. Our son was sitting on the living room floor with colored pencils scattered around him. I loosened my tie, placed my briefcase near the front door, and smiled. Hey, buddy, I said. What are you drawing tonight? He looked up with the biggest smile and held his paper high into the air. Our family, he answered proudly. I walked closer, expecting another colorful masterpiece filled with stick figures and bright sunshine. There was my wife. There was my son. There was our little house with flowers in the front yard. There was even our golden retriever, lying under a tree. But something immediately caught my attention. Someone was missing. I searched the drawing again. thinking perhaps I had overlooked myself. I hadn't. "Where am I?" I asked with a small laugh, assuming it was simply an innocent mistake. My son looked at the picture, then looked back at me with complete honesty, the kind of honesty only children possess. He shrugged his shoulders and quietly said, "I thought you were still at work." His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was calm, simple, and completely sincere. Yet those 7 words hit harder than anything I had ever heard in a boardroom, performance review, or business meeting. In that single moment, time seemed to stop. My heart suddenly felt heavier than my briefcase ever had. I wasn't missing from the drawing because my son didn't love me. I was missing because, in his everyday world, I simply wasn't there often enough to be part of the picture. Scientists studying child development often remind parents that children build memories from repeated experiences, not occasional grand gestures. Suddenly, every late meeting, every canceled family dinner, every promised next weekend, and every bedtime story I skipped came rushing back into my mind. Standing there in the warm light of our living room, holding a simple drawing made with crayons, I realized something that frightened me more than losing any job. Without meaning to, I had slowly become a visitor inside my own family. And I had no idea that my son's innocent drawing was only the beginning of a story that would completely change our marriage, our home, and the way I understood love forever. When love became quiet, silence is a strange thing. It doesn't slam the door or raise its voice. It simply sits between 2 people until one day they realize they no longer know how to reach each other. After my son's drawing, I couldn't stop thinking about those 7 simple words. "I thought you were still at work." They echoed in my mind during meetings, while driving through busy American streets, and even as I lay awake late at night beside my wife. Ironically, we were only inches apart in the same bed, yet emotionally we felt miles away. Have you ever experienced that kind of distance? You live in the same house, share the same responsibilities, and follow the same daily routine. But somehow the friendship that once made everything feel easy begins to disappear. Looking back, I don't think our marriage started falling apart because we stopped loving each other. I think it started because we stopped paying attention. Life in the United States can move incredibly fast. Every day seemed filled with alarms, traffic, work deadlines, school schedules, grocery shopping, mortgage payments, insurance bills, and endless notifications from our phones. We became experts at managing responsibilities, but beginners again when it came to caring for our relationship. Researchers who study long-term marriages often explain that emotional connection doesn't usually disappear because of one dramatic event. Instead, it slowly weakens through thousands of tiny moments when couples stop turning toward each other. I understood exactly what that meant. Every time my wife wanted to tell me about her day, I answered while checking my email. Every time I wanted to relax after work, she was already exhausted from taking care of the house and our son. We weren't choosing to ignore each other. We were simply surviving another busy day. The problem is that survival and connection are not the same thing. One Friday evening, my wife suggested we eat dinner together without the television. It sounded like such a small idea that I almost laughed. "Sure," I replied, placing my phone beside my plate. 5 minutes later, it buzzed with another work message. Without thinking, I picked it up. "Can it wait?" she asked softly. I looked at the screen, then back at her. "It's important," I answered automatically. She nodded, but something in her expression quietly changed. She didn't argue. She didn't complain. She simply continued eating. At that moment, I believed I had chosen work for only a few seconds. From her perspective, I had chosen work over us once again. Relationship psychologists often describe this as a micro-choice. Small decisions repeated every day eventually shaped the direction of a marriage far more than occasional romantic gestures. That evening, I didn't recognize the importance of that tiny moment. My wife did. The following weekend, our son asked if we could visit a nearby park. I promised we would go after I finished just one more project. 3 hours later, I walked into the living room expecting excitement. Instead, I found my wife reading quietly while our son had fallen asleep on the couch, still wearing his little sneakers because he had wanted to leave as soon as I was ready. My heart sank. I gently removed his shoes and covered him with a blanket. Children forgive quickly, but they also remember patterns. Developmental psychologists explain that young children build emotional security through consistent attention rather than occasional big events. Looking at my sleeping son, I wondered how many promises had quietly disappeared beneath my work schedule. That night, I walked into the kitchen where my wife was washing dishes. I offered to help, hoping it might somehow erase the disappointment of the afternoon. She smiled politely and handed me a towel. We stood beside each other in complete silence, listening only to running water and clinking plates. We used to talk about future vacations, dreams, and silly stories from work. Now we discussed grocery lists, school forms, and utility bills. Somewhere along the way, we had become outstanding business partners running a household instead of two people deeply in love. Human brains naturally focus on urgent problems before meaningful relationships because survival once depended on responding quickly to immediate threats. Modern life tricks that ancient system. Every email feels urgent. Every notification demands attention. But life quietly reminds us that later is one of the most dangerous words in any marriage. One rainy Sunday afternoon, while cleaning the garage, I found an old photo album from the first year my wife and I lived together. We smiled at tiny apartments, cheap furniture, burned homemade dinners, and long road trips in an old car that barely started each morning. We had very little money back then, yet our smiles looked completely different. We weren't smiling because life was easy. We were smiling because we were truly present with one another. I carried the album into the house and quietly placed it beside my wife. We turned the pages together without saying much. Finally, she looked at one photograph and whispered, "We used to talk about everything." I nodded because I couldn't argue. The truth hurt too much. At that moment, I realized our marriage hadn't been destroyed by one terrible decision. It had been quietly buried beneath hundreds of ordinary distractions. But neither of us knew that the smallest member of our family had already noticed what we were too busy to see, and very soon, he would do something so unexpected that it would force both of us to face a truth we could no longer ignore. The signs our sons saw first. Children have a remarkable gift that adults often lose. They notice what we stop seeing. They don't analyze relationships with complicated words or psychology books. They simply feel the atmosphere around them. Long before my wife and I admitted that our marriage was struggling, our son had already been living inside that invisible tension every single day. The strange part was that we believed we were protecting him. We never argued loudly. We never slammed doors or threw hurtful words across the room. We smiled during family photos and attended school events together. From the outside, we looked like an ordinary American family. But children don't judge love by appearances. They judge it by the feeling inside a home. Looking back now, I realize my son wasn't listening to our conversations nearly as much as he was listening to our silence. That realization changed everything. A few days after I found myself missing from his family drawing, I decided to leave work earlier than usual. I expected to hear cartoons playing or toys scattered across the living room. Instead, the house was unusually peaceful. My wife was helping our son build a puzzle at the dining table. He looked up, smiled politely, and said, "Hi, Dad." Then he returned to the puzzle. That simple greeting should have made me happy, but something about it felt different. Months earlier, he would have run toward the door, wrapped his tiny arms around my legs, and excitedly told me about his day. Now it was as if he had slowly learned not to expect me home before bedtime. Child psychologists explain that children naturally adjust their expectations based on repeated experiences. The brain constantly searches for patterns because patterns create a sense of predictability and safety. Without realizing it, my son had adapted to my absence. His heart had quietly lowered its expectations to avoid disappointment. That thought stayed with me all evening. During dinner, another small moment caught my attention. My wife asked our son what made him happiest that day at school. Then she asked another question. What would make tomorrow even better? He thought carefully before answering. My wife slowly placed her fork on the table. I couldn't find a single word to say. Children rarely hide behind complicated language. They simply describe the world exactly as they experience it. Researchers studying family relationships often note that children are highly sensitive to emotional climates inside the home. Even when parents believe conflict is hidden, they may not understand adult problems, but they recognize emotional distance almost immediately. That evening, my son's innocent observation revealed more about our marriage than months of pretending everything was fine. The following Saturday, we attended his youth soccer game at a nearby park. Parents filled the sidelines with folding chairs, cheering loudly every time a child kicked the ball. I stood beside my wife, but neither of us spoke very much. During halftime, several children ran toward their parents for water and hugs. Our son started running toward us too. Halfway across the field, he suddenly stopped. He looked from me to my wife, hesitated for a second, and then quietly sat alone on the grass to drink his water. It happened so quickly that almost nobody else noticed. But I did. I walked over and sat beside him. "Everything okay?" I asked. He nodded without looking up. I just didn't know who to sit with. My heart sank. There was no anger in his voice, only confusion. Marriage counselors often explain that children can feel emotionally divided when parents become disconnected, even if no one openly discusses the problems. They sometimes worry about choosing sides without fully understanding why. Hearing my son's answer made me realize that our emotional distance wasn't staying between my wife and me anymore. It was quietly reaching the person we loved most. That night, after he had gone to bed, I stood outside his bedroom door for several minutes. The hallway was dark except for a small night light glowing near the floor. I watched him sleeping peacefully, holding the same stuffed bear he had loved since he was 3 years old. Children look so safe when they sleep. Yet during the day, they carry emotions they often don't know how to explain. Neuroscientists have found that a child's developing brain is especially responsive to the emotional tone of caregivers because secure relationships help regulate stress and build resilience. I suddenly wondered how many invisible worries my son had been carrying while my wife and I remained too distracted to notice. The next morning, something happened that completely changed the direction of our family. Before breakfast, my son walked into the kitchen carrying a folded piece of paper. On the front, written in uneven handwriting, were 6 simple words. "Can we be happy again together?" My wife covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. I stared at that small note, unable to move. It wasn't a homework assignment. It wasn't a school project. It was a child's quiet prayer. He was asking for something infinitely more valuable. He simply wanted his mom and dad to find each other again. Neither of us knew it yet, but that handwritten note was about to become the turning point that would either save our marriage or reveal just how close we had come to losing. everything that truly mattered. The picture that woke us up. Sometimes the smallest things create the biggest changes. A simple drawing, a few innocent words, or a quiet moment can reveal a truth that adults spend years trying to avoid. That was exactly what happened in my family. For months, my wife and I believed we were doing everything we could to give our son a good life. We worked hard. We paid our bills. We provided a safe home in the United States. We attended important events. We bought birthday gifts and prepared meals. From the outside, we looked like responsible parents. But that small piece of paper sitting on our kitchen table showed us something we had forgotten. A family is not built only by providing things. A family is built by presence, attention, and love that can actually be felt. My son's question, "Can we be happy again together?" stayed in my mind all day. It was impossible to ignore because children rarely ask questions they don't truly feel. Adults often hide their emotions behind polite conversations, busy schedules, and professional smiles. Children don't have those masks. They simply speak from the heart. That morning, my wife and I sat at the kitchen table long after our son left the room. The coffee became cold. The sunlight moved slowly across the floor. Neither of us knew how to begin the conversation because, deep down, we both knew the answer. We had been avoiding something important for a very long time. Finally, my wife looked at me and said quietly, "When did we become strangers?" That question hurt because it was exactly what I had been afraid to admit. We didn't stop loving each other. We stopped showing love. There is a huge difference. Relationship experts often explain that strong marriages are not protected only by feelings. They are protected by daily actions. Love is not just an emotion that appears magically and stays forever. It is more like a garden. Even a most beautiful garden will disappear if nobody waters it. Looking at my wife across that kitchen table, I realized we had spent years taking care of everything except the one thing that connected us. We watered our careers. We watered our responsibilities. We watered our children's schedules. But we forgot to water our marriage. That evening, I decided to do something I had avoided for months. I turned off my laptop completely. Not sleep mode. Not silent mode. Completely off. For the first time in a long time, my attention was not divided between my family and a screen. My wife and I sat outside on the back porch after our son went to bed. The neighborhood was quiet. The warm American summer air moved gently through the trees. We didn't try to solve everything in one night. We simply talked. And surprisingly, that was the hardest part. Talking felt unfamiliar. We had become so used to discussing schedules, expenses, and responsibilities that we almost forgot how to share our thoughts and feelings. She told me she felt alone even when I was physically there. I told her I felt trapped by pressure and afraid of failing as a provider. For the first time in years, we stopped defending ourselves and started understanding each other. Psychologists call this emotional validation, the process of recognizing another person's feelings without immediately trying to fix or judge them. It sounds simple, but many couples struggle with it. We often listen only to prepare our response instead of listening to truly understand. That night, we practiced something we had forgotten, being present. Over the following weeks, we began noticing small moments that revealed how disconnected we had become. We realized we rarely asked each other meaningful questions anymore. We knew what groceries we needed, what appointments were scheduled, and what bills were due. But we didn't know what dreams were still hidden inside each other's hearts. So we created a simple habit. Every evening after dinner, we spent 15 minutes talking without phones, television, or distractions. At first, it felt awkward. 15 minutes can feel very long when two people have forgotten how to communicate. But slowly, those minutes became the most valuable part of our day. We talked about childhood memories. We talked about fears. We talked about things we wanted to experience together as a family. We laughed about old mistakes and remembered why we fell in love in the first place. Scientists studying relationships often highlight the importance of small positive interactions because repeated moments of connection rebuild trust. Over time, a marriage is rarely repaired through one dramatic conversation. More often, it heals through hundreds of small choices that say, "You matter to me." One weekend, our son noticed something different. He walked into the living room and saw my wife and me laughing together while preparing dinner. He stopped for a moment, looked surprised, and smiled. "You two are being funny again," he said. We laughed because he was right. Somewhere along the way, we had forgotten how to be playful together. We had become managers of a household instead of partners in a life. That simple comment from our son reminded us that healing was already beginning. But rebuilding a marriage is not like fixing a broken machine. You cannot simply replace one part and expect everything to work perfectly. It requires patience, honesty, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. My son didn't magically solve every problem between my wife and me. He gave us something even more important. He gave us a reason to stop pretending. He held up a mirror and showed us the family we almost lost. And that mirror was a simple drawing made by a child who only wanted one thing, to see his parents happy together again. Choosing to save our family. A marriage usually doesn't collapse in one dramatic moment. More often, it disappears quietly through thousands of small choices. The good news is that it can also be rebuilt through thousands of small choices. After my son's handwritten note changed the way my wife and I looked at our family, we realized something important. We were not standing at the end of our marriage. We were standing at a crossroads. One road continued toward distance, silence, and a life where two people simply shared a house. The other road required something much harder: honesty, patience, and the courage to start again. That second road was not easy, but for the first time in years, we both wanted to walk it together. The first step was admitting that love alone was not enough. We loved each other. We loved our son. We loved our family. But love without attention can become like a beautiful plant left in a dark room. The plant may still be alive, but slowly, it begins to lose its strength. Relationship researchers often explain that healthy connections require consistent emotional investment. The human brain responds strongly to repeated experiences of care and safety. In simple words, people don't feel loved only because someone says, "I love you." They feel loved when daily actions prove those words are true. So my wife and I made a decision that sounded simple, but changed everything. We decided to stop waiting for the perfect time to fix our marriage. The perfect time does not exist. There will always be another deadline, another responsibility, another reason to postpone important conversations. We had spent years saying, "We will have more time someday." But someday is not a real day on the calendar. It is just a comfortable place where dreams sometimes go to disappear. Our first challenge was communication. We discovered that we were not actually arguing about the things we thought mattered. We weren't fighting about money, chores, or schedules. We were fighting because both of us secretly felt unseen. I felt pressure to provide a good life. My wife felt pressure carrying emotional responsibilities alone. We were both tired, but instead of becoming teammates, we became two exhausted people standing on opposite sides of the same problem. One evening, we sat together after our son went to bed. My wife looked at me and said something I will never forget. "I don't need you to be perfect. I just need to feel like we are on the same team again." Those words completely changed my perspective. For years, I had believed being a good husband and father meant solving every problem. I thought strength meant carrying everything silently. But I learned something important. Sometimes strength is not carrying the entire world on your shoulders. Sometimes strength is admitting you need someone beside you. From that day forward, we created small routines to reconnect. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that looked impressive on social media. We started taking evening walks around our neighborhood after dinner. The streets were peaceful, with porch lights glowing and families spending time outside. Those walks became our little space away from daily pressure. We talked about our dreams, our worries, and even silly things like which neighbor had the funniest garden decoration. Slowly, laughter returned to our conversations. Another change happened during family meals. Before, dinner was often a competition between eating quickly and checking our phones. Now, we created a simple rule. Phones stayed away from the table. At first, everyone struggled. Even our brains seemed confused. We had trained ourselves to check notifications every few minutes, as if missing one message would cause the entire world to collapse. Modern technology is designed to capture attention, and our habits often follow without us realizing it. But after a few weeks, something surprising happened. Dinner became our favorite part of the day. Our son shared stories from school. My wife talked about her ideas and dreams. I shared moments from work that I would normally keep inside. We weren't just eating food anymore. We were rebuilding connection. The most powerful change, however, came from our son. He never gave us relationship advice. He never told us what to do. He simply became the reason we remembered what mattered. One Saturday morning, he walked into the kitchen while my wife and I were making breakfast together. He looked at us and smiled. "You are laughing again," he said. It was such a small sentence, but it carried enormous meaning. Our son had noticed the change before we even fully understood it ourselves. The children are incredibly sensitive to emotional environments because they depend on relationships for security. When parents reconnect, children often feel that sense of safety returning. Our home was becoming warmer, not because we bought new furniture or moved into a bigger house. Some old habits returned. Sometimes we still misunderstood each other. But the difference was that we no longer ignored the problems. We faced them together. We stopped asking who is wrong and started asking, how can we solve this together? A child cannot repair adult problems, but a child's love can remind adults why they should try. My son did not fix our family. He gave us the courage to fix it ourselves. And as we continued this journey, we discovered something even more beautiful. The smallest changes in our daily lives were creating the biggest transformation our family had ever experienced. Small changes, new beginning. The most powerful changes in life are often so small that nobody notices them at first. A stranger would not have seen anything different about our family. We did not move into a bigger house. We did not suddenly become wealthy. We did not post dramatic announcements online saying, "Our marriage is saved." Real change rarely looks exciting from the outside. Sometimes it looks like two people sitting together at the kitchen table after a long day. Sometimes it looks like a father putting his phone away when his child wants to talk. Sometimes it looks like a husband asking, "How was your day?" and actually waiting for the answer. My wife and I learned that rebuilding our family would not happen through one emotional conversation. It would happen through small decisions repeated every single day. At first, those changes felt uncomfortable. It was almost funny how difficult simple things became. We had spent so much time being busy that slowing down felt strange. Our brains had become addicted to speed. Every notification, every deadline, and every urgent task trained us to believe that stopping was dangerous. But the truth was the opposite. We weren't losing time by slowing down. We were finally getting our time back. One of the first habits we created was something incredibly simple, A family dinner without phones. In theory, this sounded easy. In reality, it felt like asking a person who loves coffee to suddenly stop drinking it. The first few evenings, my hand automatically reached toward my phone whenever it vibrated. Sometimes, I didn't even realize I was doing it. My brain had created a habit before my conscious mind could stop it. Neuroscientists explain that habits are built through repeated actions connected to certain triggers. When a phone lights up, the brain expects a reward. It wants to know the message, the news, or the update. But slowly, we trained ourselves to find a different reward, the reward of being fully present with each other. After several weeks, something beautiful happened. Dinner became longer. Conversations became deeper. Our son started telling us more stories about school. He talked about his friends, his teachers, and his little discoveries during the day. Before, we had asked questions while thinking about other things. Now, we actually listened. And children know the difference. They can feel when your attention is real. Another small change happened every Saturday morning. Instead of everyone going in different directions, we created a family tradition. We would walk through our neighborhood together. Sometimes we visited a local coffee shop. Sometimes we explored a nearby park. Sometimes we simply walked and talked about nothing important. Those moments taught me something surprising. Happiness is not always hidden inside special events. We often wait for vacations, celebrations, and major achievements to feel alive. But a meaningful life is usually created from ordinary moments repeated with love. A walk under the morning sky can become a precious memory. A simple conversation while buying groceries can become a moment your child remembers years later. My wife and I also started learning how to apologize differently. In the past, our apologies often sounded like this: "I'm sorry, but you also." That wasn't really an apology. It was a defense wearing an apology costume. We had to learn that admitting mistakes was not losing. It was connecting. One evening, after I became distracted during a conversation with my wife, I stopped myself and said, "I'm sorry. I wasn't really listening. Can you tell me again?" It was a tiny sentence, but it represented a completely different mindset. I was no longer trying to prove I was right. I was trying to understand the person I loved. Relationship experts often emphasize that emotional safety grows when people feel heard and respected. A marriage becomes stronger when both partners know they can express feelings without fear of being dismissed. Our family was slowly creating that safety again. The most amazing part was watching our son change. Before, he had become quieter around us. He often played alone and waited for us to finish whatever we were doing. But gradually, his old excitement returned. He started running into the room with stories again. He asked more questions. He laughed louder. One afternoon, while we were cooking together, he looked at my wife and me and said, "Our house feels happy again." I froze for a moment because those words came from the same little boy who had once asked if we could be happy again together. That was the moment I understood something important. Children don't need perfect parents. They need parents who are willing to grow. They don't need a family without problems. They need a family where love is stronger than problems. Life in America can sometimes make families feel like they are constantly racing. There are careers to build, bills to pay, and endless responsibilities waiting every morning. But no achievement can replace the feeling of coming home to people who are truly connected with you. Looking back, I realized our marriage was not saved by one big decision. It was saved by hundreds of small choices. A conversation instead of silence. A hug instead of distraction. A question instead of an assumption. A moment of listening instead of looking at a screen. And slowly, without even noticing, the family we almost lost began becoming the family we had always hoped to build. But there was still one thing I didn't fully understand. My son had not only helped us reconnect, he had unknowingly taught me the deepest lesson about love, patience, and what it truly means to be a father. Our son became our reminder. The person who changes your life the most is not always the person who gives you advice. Sometimes, it is the person who simply reminds you who you were before you became lost. For me, that person was my son. He was too young to understand marriage problems, emotional distance, or the complicated pressures adults carry every day. He didn't know anything about psychology, communication skills, or relationship research. Yet somehow, his innocent heart saw what my wife and I failed to see for years. He didn't repair our marriage with perfect words. He repaired our awareness. He reminded us that behind every busy schedule, every responsibility, and every goal we chased, there was a family waiting to be loved. After we started changing our daily habits, our home slowly began to feel different. But the biggest transformation was not something we planned. It came naturally from the connection we rebuilt with our son. Before, I thought being a good father meant working hard, earning money, and making sure my child had everything he needed. I believed providing was the same as loving. And yes, providing matters. A safe home, education, and financial stability are important. But I learned a painful lesson. Children do not only remember what you gave them, they remember how you made them feel. One Saturday morning, I was sitting on the floor in the living room building a small model airplane with my son. A year earlier, I would have considered this activity impossible during my busy schedule. I would have said, "Maybe later, buddy," while thinking about unfinished work. But this time, I was completely there.
No laptop,
No phone.
no distractions.
Just a father and his son trying to build something that looked much easier on the box than it actually was. After 30 minutes of struggling with tiny pieces, we both started laughing. The airplane looked strange. One wing was slightly higher than the other. It probably would never fly. But my son looked at it like we had created something amazing. "Dad," he said, "this is the best airplane ever." That sentence stayed with me because children have a completely different definition of success. Adults often measure success by perfection. The perfect career, the perfect house, the perfect image. But children measure success through connection. They don't care if the airplane is crooked. They care that you built it with them. Child development experts often explain that shared experiences create strong emotional memories because children associate feelings of safety and love with the people around them. In simple words, your child may forget the expensive things you buy, but they remember the moments when they felt important. That realization changed how I approached fatherhood. I started asking myself a different question every day. Did my son feel loved today? Not did I finish all my tasks. Not did I achieve everything at work. Not did I solve every problem. Those things mattered, but they were not the foundation of my happiness. The foundation was the relationship I was building with the people who would still matter when my career eventually became a memory. My wife noticed the change too. One evening, after our son went to sleep, she sat beside me and smiled. "You know," she said, "he's been happier lately." I nodded because I had noticed the same thing. His laughter had returned. His curiosity had returned. The confidence in his voice had returned. But then she said something that surprised me. "I think he is not the only one who changed." I looked at her. She continued, "You are different too." At first, I wanted to disagree. But then I realized she was right. I wasn't just spending more time with my family. I was becoming a different person. I was calmer. I was more patient. I was learning to enjoy moments instead of constantly chasing the next achievement. Psychologists often describe this shift as moving from achievement-based identity to meaning-based identity. Many people build their entire sense of worth around what they accomplish. But lasting fulfillment often comes from understanding why those accomplishments matter. A successful career feels empty if you have nobody to share your life with. A beautiful home feels cold if the people inside it feel like strangers. One evening, our son brought home a school assignment. His teacher asked the students to write about someone who inspired them. I expected him to choose an athlete, a superhero, or a famous person. Instead, he wrote about our family. When I read his paper, one sentence made me stop breathing for a moment. He wrote, "My parents learned how to love each other again, and now our home feels happy." I had to look away because my eyes became emotional. Children see more than we imagine. They don't just see our mistakes. They also see our efforts. They notice when we try. They notice when we grow. They notice when love returns. That night, I realized my son had never been a problem we needed to protect from our struggles. He had always been the reason we needed to face them. He was not the person who saved our marriage because he fixed something broken. He was the person who saved our marriage because he reminded us that something beautiful was still worth protecting. And as our family continued healing, I discovered another surprising truth about life in America, family, and happiness. Sometimes the home you're searching for is not a place. Sometimes it is the feeling created by the people who choose each other every single day. Happiness without perfection. Many people spend their entire lives searching for a perfect life, but they forget one important truth. A perfect life does not exist. A meaningful life does. For many years, I believed happiness would arrive after I achieved certain goals. I thought it would come when my career became more successful, when our house was more comfortable, when our family had fewer problems, or when everything finally felt under control. But life has a funny way of teaching us lessons we never expected. Sometimes, the moment we stop chasing perfection is the moment we finally notice the beauty already around us. After my wife and I began rebuilding our marriage, our family entered a new chapter. It was not a magical transformation where every morning felt like a movie scene with perfect sunlight and happy music. Real life is not like that. We still had stressful days. We still disagreed sometimes. We still faced the normal challenges of raising children and managing responsibilities in America. But something important had changed. We were no longer facing those challenges as two separate people. We were facing them together. And that made all the difference. I started noticing small moments that I had ignored for years. One morning, I watched my wife prepare breakfast while our son was telling an extremely detailed story about a school project. The story involved a pencil, a science experiment, and a classmate who accidentally dropped a box of materials everywhere. Honestly, it was not a world-changing event. No newspaper would write about it. No award would be given. But as I watched my son's excitement and my wife's laughter, I realized something powerful. This was the life I had been searching for while running away from it every day. Psychologists often explain that humans have a natural tendency to focus on what is missing instead of appreciating what already exists. This is sometimes called the negativity bias. Our brains are designed to notice problems because, thousands of years ago, noticing danger helped humans survive. But in modern life, that same system can make us overlook simple happiness. We see the unfinished tasks. We see the problems. We see what we still need to achieve. Meanwhile, the beautiful moments quietly pass by. Learning to appreciate those moments became one of the greatest lessons my family taught me. Living in the United States, I also began seeing culture and family life differently. American life often encourages independence, ambition, and personal success. These values can be powerful. They inspire people to work hard, create opportunities, and follow their dreams. But sometimes, in the pursuit of success, people forget that achievements are meant to support life, not replace it. A promotion cannot hug you after a difficult day. A bigger paycheck cannot laugh with you at the dinner table. A professional title cannot sit beside you and remember your childhood stories. The people we love are the ones who give meaning to everything else. One evening, my family and I were sitting in our backyard. The sky was changing colors as the sun slowly disappeared behind the houses. Our son was playing with a small ball, running around with endless energy. My wife was sitting beside me, and for a few minutes, nobody said anything. It was a peaceful silence. But this silence was different from the silence we experienced years earlier. Before, silence meant distance. Now, silence meant comfort. That difference was everything. A healthy relationship does not require constant excitement. Sometimes love is simply feeling safe enough to sit together without needing to fill every second with words. Over time, my wife and I created more family traditions. We cooked together on weekends. We celebrated small achievements. We took short trips to nearby places instead of always waiting for the perfect vacation. We learned that memories are not created only during extraordinary events. They are created during ordinary days when people choose to be present. Our son also taught us something about happiness. Children are naturally connected to the present moment. They can spend 30 minutes watching a small insect walk across the ground or become completely excited about a simple ice cream cone. Adults often lose that ability because our minds are always traveling somewhere else, yesterday's mistakes or tomorrow's worries. But children remind us that life is happening right now. One afternoon, my son asked me a question while we were walking in the park. "Dad, are you happy now?" I looked at him and smiled. A few years earlier, I might have answered with a list of achievements. I might have talked about work, goals, or future plans. But this time, I simply said, "Yes, I am." Because I finally understood something I had missed for so long. Happiness was never hidden in a future version of my life. It was already waiting inside the moments I almost ignored. My son's question did not just save my marriage. It changed the way I saw everything. It taught me that family is not about creating a perfect picture. It is about creating a real one with mistakes, challenges, laughter, forgiveness, and love. Because the most beautiful families are not the ones without problems. They are the ones that choose each other again after problems appear. And our story was not about becoming perfect. It was about becoming present. The marriage we almost lost. The most painful lessons in life are often the ones that arrive after we almost lose something precious. For a long time, I believed losing my career success would be my biggest fear. I thought failure meant missing a promotion, making a mistake at work, or not reaching the goals I had created for myself. But after everything my family experienced, I discovered a deeper truth. The greatest loss is not failing to achieve a dream. The greatest loss is waking up one day and realizing you ignored the people who made your life meaningful. When I looked back at the difficult years of my marriage, I did not see a lack of love. I saw a lack of awareness. We had been so focused on building a good life that we almost forgot to enjoy the life we had already built. My wife and I were not enemies. We were two tired people who forgot we were on the same team. That realization changed the way I understood marriage. A strong relationship is not created by two perfect people. It is created by two imperfect people who continue choosing each other, especially during difficult seasons. Marriage experts often explain that long-term relationships survive not because couples never experience problems, but because they learn how to repair connection after problems appear. Repair became the word that described our journey. We were not trying to return to the exact relationship we had when we first met, We were creating something new, something deeper, more honest, and stronger. One evening, my wife and I looked through old photographs again. We found pictures from the beginning of our relationship. There we were, younger versions of ourselves, sitting in small restaurants, exploring new places, and laughing at things that were not even funny. We remembered the little apartment where we started our life together. We remembered eating simple meals because we were saving money. We remembered dreaming about the future. The interesting thing was that we had fewer possessions back then, but we felt richer. We had more time, more conversations, more curiosity about each other. Somewhere along the journey, we gained many things, but accidentally traded away some of the things that mattered most. That evening, my wife said something that stayed with me forever. Maybe we didn't lose our love. Maybe we just stopped looking for it. I think that sentence describes many relationships. Sometimes love does not disappear. It simply becomes hidden beneath stress, routines, and responsibilities. Like a beautiful song playing quietly in another room, it is still there. We just need to stop making so much noise to hear it again. After that conversation, we continued protecting our family connection. We started having weekly family nights. Sometimes we played board games. Sometimes we watched movies together. Sometimes we simply talked while eating dessert after dinner. The activity itself was never the important part. The important part was showing up. Our son taught us that presence is one of the greatest gifts we can give someone. Children do not need parents who are available every second. That is impossible. They need parents who create moments where they feel seen, heard, and valued. As our family became closer, I also reflected on my own journey as a father. I realized I had spent years trying to give my son a successful future while forgetting to give him a connected present. I was building a road for him, but almost forgot to walk beside him. That thought changed how I approached parenting. I became more interested in his stories, even the small ones. I learned about his favorite games, his fears, his dreams, and the little things that made him excited. Those conversations seemed ordinary, but ordinary moments become extraordinary memories later. Years from now, my son may not remember every toy he owned or every place we visited, but I hope he remembers that his father listened, that his father was there, that his home was a place where love could grow. Living in America also taught me something important about balance. The culture around us often celebrates achievement and independence. People work hard to create better opportunities for themselves and their families. That ambition can be beautiful, but success needs a foundation. Without meaningful relationships, achievements can feel strangely empty. A person can have a full calendar but an empty heart. They can be surrounded by people but still feel alone. My family helped me understand that a successful life is not measured only by what you accomplish. It is measured by what you protect. Today, when I look at my wife and my son, I do not see a perfect family. I see a real family. A family that struggled. A family that made mistakes. A family that almost lost its connection but decided to fight for it. And maybe that is what makes our story special. Not that we avoided hardship, but that hardship reminded us what was worth saving. My son did not save our marriage because he had magical answers. He saved it because his innocent heart showed us the truth we were afraid to face. He reminded us that love is not something we find once and keep forever. Love is something we choose, protect, and rebuild every single day. And as I look at our family now, I understand one final lesson from that difficult chapter of our lives. Sometimes the person who changes your future is the one who simply asks you to remember what truly matters. The love we chose again. Sometimes the greatest stories are not about people who never fall apart. They are about people who fall apart, look at the pieces, and decide to rebuild something more beautiful. When I think about the journey my family experienced, I no longer remember only the difficult moments. I remember the lessons hidden inside them. I remember a small drawing made by my son. I remember a quiet kitchen where my wife and I finally admitted the truth. I remember the evenings when we slowly learned how to talk again. Those moments were painful, but they became the foundation of a stronger family. Today, our life in the United States is not perfect. Our house still gets messy. Our schedules still become busy. We still have stressful days when work feels overwhelming and responsibilities seem endless. But there is one important difference. We no longer allow busy days to steal the people we love. We learned that a happy family is not created by avoiding challenges. It is created by facing challenges together. Looking back, I understand why so many people struggle with relationships. Modern life gives us countless reasons to disconnect. We carry phones that constantly demand attention. We work longer hours. We compare our lives to unrealistic pictures online. We chase success because we want security for the people we love. But sometimes, while trying to build a better future, we forget to appreciate the present moment. My biggest mistake was believing that providing a good life was the same as sharing a good life. I thought love was something my family automatically understood because I worked hard for them. But love is not only about sacrifice. Love is also about presence. It is about sitting down and listening. It is about noticing a child's smile. It is about asking your partner, "How are you really feeling?" and caring about the answer. One evening, several years after that difficult period, my son found the old drawing he created when our family was struggling. The paper was slightly damaged. The colors had faded. But the words were still there. "Can we be happy again together?" He looked at the drawing and laughed. "I was so serious when I wrote this," he said. My wife and I smiled because we remembered that moment so clearly. Then my son looked at us and said something unexpected. "I think it worked." We both laughed. But inside, I felt emotional. He believed his little question had changed our family. In a way, he was right. Not because children can solve adult problems. They cannot. A child should never carry the responsibility of fixing a marriage. That responsibility belongs to the adults. But children can remind us of the love that already exists. They can become the reason we stop ignoring important things. They can hold up a mirror and show us what we truly value. Psychologists often explain that meaningful relationships are built through repeated moments of connection. A single conversation rarely transforms a relationship forever. Instead, transformation happens through small actions repeated over time. A kind word, a patient response, a shared meal, a moment of laughter, a sincere apology. These small moments seem ordinary, but they become the memories that shape a family. This lesson also changed the way I think about learning English and sharing stories. Many people believe improvement requires perfection. They wait until their pronunciation is perfect, their vocabulary is perfect, or their confidence is perfect before they begin speaking. But my own life taught me something different. Growth happens when we are willing to start imperfectly. A child learning to speak does not fear mistakes. They try, they fail, they laugh, and they try again. Adults often forget that simple courage. Whether we are rebuilding a marriage, learning a language, or creating a new chapter in life, progress begins with one small step. My family story is not a story about a perfect ending. It is a story about a hopeful beginning that continues every day. My wife and I still choose each other. My son still fills our home with laughter. We still make mistakes, but now we know how to return to each other. We know that love is not measured by the absence of problems. Love is measured by the willingness to stay connected through them. If you are listening to this story because you are learning English, remember this. You don't need to understand every single word immediately. Just like rebuilding a relationship, learning a language happens one small moment at a time. Listen today.
Practice tomorrow.
Speak when you feel ready. Small efforts repeated consistently can create incredible results. And if you are listening because you are facing a difficult season in your own life, I hope my story reminds you of something important. Sometimes what feels broken is not always lost. Sometimes it simply needs attention, patience, and love. The little boy who once asked if his parents could be happy again gave our family the greatest gift. He reminded us that home is not a building. Home is the feeling created when people choose to care for each other. And after everything we experienced, I finally understand the answer to the question that changed my life. Can a child save a marriage? The answer is no. A child cannot carry that responsibility. But a child's love can remind two adults why their marriage is worth saving. Because sometimes the smallest voice in the room can awaken the biggest love in the house.